Hello and welcome. My name's Xavier, the host of the Hooked On NRL SuperCoach podcast, and I'm joined today by my co-host Jacob Fisher. How you going, Jacob?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, always good. On the brink of footy season, so yeah, I can't wait for the season to start. Pre-season trials just around the corner, and yeah, keen to rip into some SuperCoach.
Exactly, mate. Let's do it.
All right, mate. Just to start off, obviously we are a new podcast, and just wanted to give our listeners a bit of a background on who we are, sort of our background with Supercoach, who we support as a footy fans, how into the footy we are, those sorts of things. So I'll start us off by saying, as I said before, my name's Xavier. I'm been playing Supercoach for maybe 5 or so years now. I ranked 558 last season, which was my highest rank to date, and I got really into it. I'm a huge Warriors supporter, as you can tell by the jersey. And yeah, over to you on that stuff, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for that, Xavier. I am also a fellow Supercoach addict. I have been playing for probably almost 8 years now. I started back in 2016, 2017, got a really good ranking back then, came top 200, and kind of been hooked and addicted ever since. And so, yeah, I am also a massive Tigers fan. So hopefully a good season ahead. We're sick of the three-peat of the spoons, and then big year ahead in that Supercoach.
That's it, mate. Hopefully the Tigers can have a big year with all their signings. Yeah, so obviously Jacob and I, we had quite good seasons last year, and we thought to ourselves in the off season that we were thinking about starting a podcast, and now we're here. And our first episode will also be touching on positional analysis. So we'll be having a look at the hooker position. But before I get into that, I wanted to have a chat about the new Supercoach because this year is quite different to previous years. They've introduced a flex position. So with that flex position, they've upped the salary cap, and now players have access to, or coaches have access to, an additional player. And there's some new rules around that as well. So basically, your 18 players, you'll pick 18 players, including your flex. Same as always with your 17 on field, four reserves, and then your flex position. Um, what happens now is that your 17 highest scoring players will be scoring in your team. So whoever's in that 17 in that 18 men and scores lowest will drop out of your score for the round. So it changes a lot to do with strategy this year. I know I've seen a couple of people choosing three gun fullbacks at the back. Even tinkering with running a dud at 5'8" or a dud at front row forward because you can do that now. Yeah, because obviously that lowest score drops out. Have you got any thoughts on that at all, Jacob?
Yeah, thanks, Xavier. I do think it is going to open the playing field right up again because, as you said, that lowest score now drops out. So it does give you that ability, especially in the front row forward sort of position where we usually get these plotters, 30, 40 like guys we're just not focused on and don't really want. Bit of a dead position. So to be able to, for that position to drop out and that score to drop out while utilizing the flex, I think it will be a good addition to Supercoach this year and it will involve a bit more strategy.
That's it. I'm really looking forward to it, mate. And haven't got my head around how I'm going to utilize that position yet. But yeah. So for now, before we get into the hooker analysis as well, I just want to have a brief chat with Jacob and what worked for us so well last season and our strategy. We were actually having a little chat before the podcast about going through our history and where things went right and what got us to the top end of the rankings. And one of the things in common that we had was I'd used four of my boosts by around 8, I believe, and I think Jacob, you were
Round 10, yeah, I'd use four of my boosts by round 10.
yeah.
Just really trying to accelerate that team value and trying to build that depth. That was one of my key focuses for me.
That's it. I think it's really important. And Supercoach, a lot of people say, it's important to save trades and these sorts of things, but I think it's really important to get off to a fast start. Use the trades where you need them, and get the points. Points and cash, there's a age-old debate about what's more value. Ultimately, you're trying to optimize both of those things. But at the same time, there's no point saving trades for the sake of saving trades. got to be at the top end to fight for the winning prize, I think. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Xavier. And I'll just quickly highlight here. So, obviously, after round one last season, I had started with just an average score, 56K. Then round two, 49K. But as you can see, slowly with the use of the trades and the boosts and just good acquisition, by round 10, by the time I'd used four of my boosts, I was already sitting in the top 800. So I think that really highlights like it can get you off to that good start, that quick start, while also building that team value. So as we say here, I had 14.8 million pretty much team value by round 10.
Yeah, that's a key thing to know. And yeah, it's one of those reflecting on last season and what went well. I think that's a very, very, very key aspect of it is that we both had gone all out on our trades quite early on, and we both finished quite well in the season. So there might be a bit of adjusting to that this season with the flex position, but overall, I think we're both coaches that have sort of had that sort of mindset from the get go. Anyway, we'll move on to the hooker analysis now and give you our thoughts on who to pick at hooker and do's and don'ts, who's got value, etc. Would you mind just changing it to sort by the highest price? We'll go from that way, I think. Perfect. So as you can see, we've got Harry Grant at the top here. Undoubtedly, he's the best hooker in SuperCoach. But if you have a look at his draw, in round two, he has the bye, and then in round three, he has Penrith, which is a huge deterrent when picking these guys with a lot of value in your team that take up a lot of your salary cap at the start of the season. You need to make sure that you're optimizing your price, the salary cap early on, and not taking guys that have these bad draws or have a bye early on because the price change doesn't account for until 3 rounds are played. What are your thoughts on that with Harry Grant? Has he come across your mind in your first team?
Yeah. So look, a bit of my strategy is as hooker isn't really that high up scoring position. And while I agree Harry Grant definitely is that number one guy in hooker, I think it's a position where you don't have to gun up straight away, especially because he's like a notorious slow starter sort of guy, and he kind of picks it up near the back end of the season. I won't be starting with Harry Grant next year.
Geez, that's a big call, mate. This year, you mean, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big call. Look, I did have a look at Harry. I believe it's his lowest average in a few years now, and he's someone that you can just set and forget in a position for sure. Um, but when I have a think and I have a look at his draw, and also the other value propositions in that position, I tend to agree with you. I don't think he's a bad buy by any means. If you went out and said that you wanted Harry Grant, I'm not going to go and tell you no, terrible buy, because I think he's underpriced on what he can deliver. He tends to start picking up his form around the origin period as well. He actually starts the season off a bit slower, and then heading towards that first origin, he starts ramping up. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, very good. All right, we'll go down to the next one. We have Damien Cook. Now, Cookie obviously had a really good end to last year at the Bunnies, but this year he's now at the Dragons, so at a new club, but he's also going to be sharing the position with Jacob Little, as you can see, who also had a really good season last year and is the third most expensive hooker. So, what are your thoughts on the Dragons hooker, Xavier?
I have absolutely no interest in taking either of them on at those price tags. Risk of splitting minutes. Damien Cook's getting older. I think Liddell had a lot of tries last year, and he's going to likely be on the bench. Even if Cook or Liddell does move into a middle rotation, they're both on at the same time, or Cook moves to the centres like he does. I just have zero interest at those prices for either of them.
I concur. I do think they are both extremely overpriced. And just with, as we'll get into shortly, the value in this position this year, I do think they are both strong avoids, probably for the season, unless one of them does get injured and the Dragons have a good run of draws or fixtures coming up. But that would really be the only case where I would be touching a Dragons hooker this year.
Yeah, agreed, mate.
And so we'll get into the next one. This is a bit of a personal favorite for you, I believe, Xavier. Maxi Platt.
That's it. He's yeah, Queensland boy. Went to school just down the road from me, down at Iona, I believe. Was actually in my brother's grade too, but he's just an absolute workhorse of a player. This kid. And we saw that come to fruition last year when he had a bit of a breakout season playing at lock. If you actually watch his games, he just goes and goes and goes. He's a bit of meat and potatoes player though, so you're not getting many attacking stats off him, but he will tackle and tackle and tackle. I think he's better when he plays at 13, which is what he was doing last year, and I think he will be doing again this year. But I will have to wait till teamless because I think with Tom Gilbert coming back, he could take on that lock role, and then Plath might be on the bench. So either way, whilst the duel's handy, I don't have much interest in him this year, unfortunately. I think he's slightly overpriced. There's concerns over what minutes he'll be getting and his role. I think he will be in the middle rotation, maybe spell JMK, but I don't know. I don't want to spend 600k on an uncertainty. He needs those minutes in order to produce. Because as I said, he doesn't have much of the attacking upside, but what he does do is work really hard and tackle when he is on the park. So, what are your thoughts on him, Jacob?
Yeah, I would agree. He is an absolute workhorse. Like he's just a machine. But yeah, as you touched on this year, we're not really too sure with how his role is going to be this year. As you said, he did have that breakout season last year, but yeah, just with the uncertainty. And while the duel is flexible, like that second row forward hooker duel is really valuable. As someone else will touch on very shortly, Connor Watson, I do believe that Max Plath to start the season anyway is a bit of an avoid until we get a better understanding of how his role is this year at the Dolphins.
I tend to agree, mate. Love him as a player, and I think he's going to be really good in the Queensland Origin rep, but in the future. But starting off at 620k with uncertainty around his role, if I'm spending that big money, I want to be absolutely sure in their role and what they can produce, and they have to be someone that can put out 100 plus or tons consistently, and I just don't see him doing that at least to start the season, and probably for the majority of the season, he's more of a meat and potatoes, safe as houses kind of pick. All right, we'll move on to the next one that you have there, Jacob. This is your boy, actually, as a Tigers fan. Uppy Coruscant, what are your thoughts on him to start?
Mate, so little insight for the viewers. I started with Appy last year and I held him all year. Like he was just one of those guys last year that despite the Tigers' woes and whatnot, he's with the goal kicking, his base and his attacking ability to get those line breaks, those tries, assists, he possesses that attacking upside as like your Harry Grants, but unlike the Plass and Sword, he does have that attacking upside. So yeah, I think he is a good shout. He is a bit more expensive this year at that over 600k price tag. So I'm not certain yet if I will start with him, but I do think he is a very good buy, especially if he keeps the kicking. But I know Talon Silva this year is going to be a bit more involved. So I would like to see how that minute split will work. Because with Appy playing 60 minutes, I just don't think he's worth that 600k price tag.
I agree, mate. He's also suspended for round one, I believe. So that's a huge spanner in the works. I wouldn't be starting with someone that misses the first, unless I'm not going to put a blanket no out there to if they miss the first round, but it makes it a bit more difficult to pick someone like Appy. There's uncertainty around goal kicking as well, whether he keeps the goal kicking. If he keeps the goal kicking, plays 80, then I can see him being a great pick. But as you touched on, Talon Silva is climbing through the ranks now, and he's out for round one. So for me, just purely because of that, I've got no interest in starting with Uppy at all.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. We'll go down now to Reese Robson. So he also had a bit of a breakout season. I wouldn't say breakout, like he's been a gun for a couple years now. But last year he really solidified that sort of hooking role for the Cowboys. And it was also his last year at the Cowboys this year. So I wonder if he's going to be trying up for a big season sort of thing. What are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
I think Reece Robson's a very good player. But in terms of SuperCoach at 590k, at the start of the season, we're looking for value. and we're looking for points. A perfect mixture of those, and I think he will get some solid points in the hooking position. You know what you're going to get out of him. He will more than likely play 80 minutes and be tough as houses in the middle, make his tackles and make a couple of runs. But I think he's pretty well priced at what you'll be paying for. And at the hooker position, if there's other people that have value there, and I'm sure that we'll get to them when we scroll down, and I'd rather go with those guys that can give you a bit of value as well as points. And I just don't think Reece Robson is that to start the season.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. I would agree. We'll move on now to McInnes. So McInnes is based at 590k. He also has that handy second row forward hooker duel, but again, he's a bit similar to Robson and Maxi Platt, just like a workhorse sort of thing. Not many attacking stats, can tackle the house down, just an absolute machine in the middle of the park. But for me, he just does not possess that upside, and I have not even thought about him once.
Jeez, mate, I actually disagree slightly with you on that. I actually quite like McInnes as an option this year. I think that at the minimum, you'll get what you pay for. But with McInnes, I think with the addition with AFB is actually going to help him a lot. If you see when you watch Sharky's games, he's often running into the line and throwing the short ball. And I think having AFB off his hip with Hazleton as well, he might get a few more attacking stats. I also think that they're going to run Atkinson in the 14 jumper, and McInnes. Don't know about big minutes, but he's pretty well the leader of that forward pack. You know, he's tough as nails, and he is going to play the most minutes in that forward pack. He might come on and give Brayley a spell. I actually don't mind him. I can't see him playing less than 60 minutes, to be honest. And I think with the Panthers in the first game, that's a perfect game. He broke the tackle record against them a couple of seasons ago. So, you know, he's just going to be eating up the tackles. The Sharkies don't have a bad draw. He's the leader of the pack. He's safe and he's got duel. I actually prefer him over this next guy that you're going to touch on. We're happy to move to him, or
We are, yeah. And
yeah.
so this is someone who I'm a bit more interested in as well, Connor Watson. So for me, Connor Watson, I had him last season before he got injured. Now, that is one of the things with Connor Watson. For some reason, whatever it is, he seems to be very injury prone. He just can't string a bunch of games together. But who knows? This year could be the season where he just plays the whole season. And at that value, 583k, I think he's a good price, very well priced. We know he has that attacking upside. He is an absolute workhorse as well, but he possesses more of an attacking upside as well. Like we've seen him dart through the line, we've seen him get those tries, try assists sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Oh, look, I agree, mate. He's a great player. I just saw a clip earlier as well of him winning the yo-yo test at the Roosters in the preseason, which is good signs. Obviously, he's a very fit player. In terms of the option, I quite like it, but I don't think it's as good of an option as what the ownership says. I think when you're going to play a bit of devil's advocate here, when he plays at hooker and strictly at hooker, he scores a lot less because he's not taking those runs. He's just shoveling the ball off the deck, and I think we're going to see similar to that. I believe I saw a stat. I don't want to give anyone misinformation here, but I believe I saw a stat that when he plays at hooker, plays 70 minutes, he averages 62 and he's priced at 60. So, yeah, I agree that there's some value there, but is it enough value to really throw it all in and go with him? I don't think so. I honestly prefer McInnes is a bit more of a pod play, and I know that's against the crowd at the moment, but I just think Watson at 9, he's going to lose a lot of attacking stats and he'll just be racking up tackles in the middle. I do think he'll play big minutes, however, and I understand what you're saying because he is an explosive player. But, you know, the Roosters with a few losses in the middle, they've got no Warrior Hargraves anymore. I don't know about how their go forward will go. They've got new halves pairing, so I'm just a bit concerned. I don't think he's a bad buy, and I do think he's a little better value, but I just don't think it is 24% ownership, as you can see there, value. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. I do believe that with, as you mentioned and touched on, the lack of halves pairing and the new, because as we know, Sandon Smith might be in that nine role as well as in the halves sort of thing. And then Sammy Walker is also out. So I believe Tedesco and Connor Watson will kind of be that attacking spark for the Chooks. And I think if the Chooks get off to a good start or a good run, he will be in and around the points for sure. So now we've touched on
Um,
him. We will cross over. We'll get a few together now just to speed things up. We'll go
yeah.
Reed, Marnie, JMK, and Brayley. Do any of those three sort of interest you?
Yes. When the initial team picker came out, JMK was in my side. I think if we cast our mind back to 2 seasons ago, he was sort of rivaling Harry Grant. He was at that level. I think that perhaps with a new coach, obviously no Bennett anymore at the Dolphins, he might see a bit of a change of role, an increased role. If you had a look back to Damien Cook when Wayne Bennett was coaching him, he was more so passing and he wasn't doing his explosive runs. But I think with Marshall King, with a new coach, potentially you might see that running game back. He also had a bad run with injury. If he plays 70 plus minutes, I think he's a great value buy. He, out of the lot so far, is my favorite that we've gone through so far, is my favorite. And if I was spending coin there, he is probably who I'd look to just because I think he has attacking upside as he's shown. He's got a new coach who might want him running more. I think Wayne Bennett typically likes his nines being more tackle bots in the middle. And also, coming off an injury as well, injury affected season. And the Dolphins, I believe, don't have a bye until very late. I think he plays the first at least 13 rounds straight or so. So I think he's actually, and obviously he's a Kiwi. So I think he's quite a good buy. And I'm still tossing up potentially starting with him. I quite like him. As for the other two, Reed Marnie, I don't have any interest in him at all. He's burnt me a few times in the past. I I just don't think he doesn't have a running game. He gets points from tackles and 40-20s and a couple of kicks in behind. Um, and as we know, the Dogs don't have the biggest forward pack, so I'm not overly interested in Reed Marnie at all at that price. Blake Brayley does kind of interest me, as I touched on before with McInnes. I think Fanua Blake is a huge addition, and as a top try scoring prop with Hazleton running off Blake Brayley could see a lot more try assists, and I think he is getting better as a player as well. So I do have some slight interest in Brayley, but not not as much as Marshall King, for example.
Yeah, you make a good point there. And yeah, I'm the same. Reed Marnie just not interested at all. JMK potentially interested around that 550K, so a bit of value there in that price, given he was a bit more last year. But yeah, as you touched on, as I actually had him last year, and then he just got injured. He could not string any games together. And yeah, as you mentioned, the Dolphins do have a really good buy draw. So he is one of those guys that you could just kind of set and forget for the first 13 weeks. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, now with Bennett gone, hopefully that might bring Marshall King's running game back a bit. But for me, it's more of a wait and see to see how that minute split. Where does Platt kind of fit into this whole rotation? Is Marshall King playing the 80? Those are the sort of questions that I'm going to be waiting on to see. But we might get a bit more insight from that from the preseason trials. And then yeah, Brayley, I think at 520K also is a decent bit of value. I like your thoughts with AFB, and he could bring that attacking upside. And Brayley is one of those fit blokes that's always in the middle, always following through as well. So that could be a little pod, and especially at 3% ownership, could be a very nice point of difference compared to some of the others. So now none of these hookers are mainly relevant. We'll get down here. So, what are your thoughts on Blake Moiser?
Yeah, look, mate, the Broncos obviously have a big rap on him. At the moment, for everything I'm hearing out of the club, but I just read an article the other day saying that Corey Pakes is in the front running to win that spot. If that's the case, and Blake Moses anything but in the number 9 jersey, I have no interest in him. I think he's quite crafty, but having a look at his stats last year, I I'm not fully sold. He would have to be playing minimum 55 minutes for me to consider him, and I just don't think he will get that, at least to start the year. So I'm not very overly interested in him.
I think you make a good point there. I think it's a bit more of a wait and see kind of suppose. We'll go through trials, we'll wait through the team list and then the round one team list. That will be kind of the telling point because, yeah, whoever secures that number 9 role at the Broncos, they should see some value in there. Because obviously Moyes is at 312K and then Pakes is at 232K. So whatever hooker kind of gets that role, there is a good bit of value there. And then speaking of value, one of the hookers that I will definitely be starting with this year, Peter Mazulius. What are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Marmuz Alice, mate. Marmuz Alice. Yeah, he's in my side at the moment. I don't think he's as much of a slam dunk pick as what the ownership says. However, I think Jamie Humphries coming to the club and playing the 14 role is quite a deterrent potentially for him. Because if Ellis say only gets 50 minutes or 55 minutes, then I'm not sure how much value is there. We've seen flashes of attacking upside with him with a strong running game. The Bunnies also don't have the strongest forward pack. But yes, that's playing a bit of devil's advocate there. I like the buy at the price. I feel a bit more secure that he will get the 9 spot. I've seen a bit more of him play as opposed to a Moser. Looking at his stats, they read better per minute. He's got a better PPM than Moser, for example. So I'm much more interested in him.
Yeah, look, at 300K, especially if he's feeling that Damien Cook sort of role next year for the Bunnies, he will definitely be a value proposition. And obviously, the Bunnies coming off one of their worst seasons in recent times, they'll be out to prove a point. So I think he could get off to a bit of a quick start and generate that early cash, which is what we're after, sort of early doors in the SuperCoach. So yeah, I think at 300K, you can't argue with it. Like, I just think it's a great pick, and I would not advise anyone against it, sort of thing. Now, someone else who also possess a lot of bit of value and currently one of the most highest owned players in the game, Sandon Smith. What are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Standing straight in the side, he was one of my first picked. As you can see, 55% ownership. I think there's no reason not to pick him. Kiri departing the club, Walker out injured. He's touted to get the number 6 role, partnering Chad Townsend, and potentially goal kicking as well with Suali'i leaving the club as well. So with all those things, 237K, playing in probably a lot weaker Roosters side. I don't think he's going to set the world on fire, but I do think he's going to make a lot of money. So he was one of the first pick. He has a dual. I can't really see much of an argument against why he wouldn't start with Sandon Smith.
Yeah, look, I would agree. And I would be very surprised that by the time round one actually comes around, we see this ownership at about 70 to 80%, because there's really no reason why you can't fit him in. Obviously, halfbacks are probably where we'll go guns, and we have that more of a position slot there at hooker. So I do prefer him having him in that hooker slot. But yeah, look, I think at 237K is just a no-brainer. Set and forget, make that early cash, and then move on with him later on. All right, so I feel like that covers hookers. We'll move on to the front rows position now.
Oh,
We're
we'll just
starting
do
off.
we'll do the hookers today, mate. Just the hookers, I think. Or did you want to do front rows as well
How are we going
for time?
to? Yeah, so do we want to go hookers, front row forwards, second row forwards, like the forwards, and we'll do the backs next episode, sort of thing?
I think we'll keep it boring and we'll go hookers, front row forwards, and then we might go second row forwards because there's so many second row forwards in the separate episodes. So we'll go with the front row forwards. There was one more hooker that I'd like to touch on in this episode. It's Wade Egan. We just missed him there. I think that potentially the Warriors might, as a Warriors fan, I think they might run a 4-forward bench, or at worst they'll have Harris Tavita there. If Egan is playing 80 minutes, he's shown what he can do. Obviously, there's a huge injury risk with him, but I think that he is definitely underpriced on what he can produce. 50 points per game if he plays 80 minutes. I quite like the pick. If you see no Freddie Lussick on the bench, I think he would be a great pick that not many people are having a look at the moment, to be honest. He's a bit of a pod buy. He's got the attacking upside. He's creative. And yeah, he's just an all-round quite a good player. He's got Barnett and Fisher Harris running off him. And so, yeah, Freddie Lussick's not on the bench. I would be quite interested in him for a little bit more, but the caveat is the injuries. He seems to get injured or taken off the field for the HIA almost every game. So,
Yeah, I would agree. For me, Wade Egan, he is, especially now that Sean Johnson has retired, I feel like he could be coming into his own and he could take up that leadership role and be sort of that guy for the Warriors. So there is the potential there to be really a really good asset. But I think at just below 500K, as you mentioned, with the injury risk, I just don't think it's really worth it to start off with. But as you said, he could hit the ground running, could show everyone up, not get injured, get a string of games together, and just provide that really good value as well as being a massive pod. So yeah, I think that's a great mention there, Xavier.
thanks, mate. We'll move on to front row forward now. Geez, starting off with the big bopper that got quite a few mentions in the hooker section, Adam Fanua-Blake. What are your thoughts on him, mate?
Look, I had AFB last year at the Wars, and obviously he is the best prop in the game attacking stat wise. Like he can just create something out of nothing. He has that offload ability. He has that try ability. He has those tries, assists. He just hits the line hard. He just knows where to be, and he just manages to grab a bunch of stats. Now, I think at 706K to start the season, that is a bit more expensive than what I'd like, especially in that front row forward position where we're just not. I'm more after value in that position rather than paying up for the premium guns because I'd much prefer to spend my money on the fullbacks and the halves and whatnot. But I think 706K is a bit overpriced, but he has that attacking ability. It will be interesting to see how he goes at the Sharks. I do believe it will be an upgrade for him in terms of like attacking stats and whatnot. I think the Sharks will be really able to utilize him and get the best out of him. So yeah, obviously at 12% ownership, I feel like this is really the decision you made. If you want to pay up, it's between AFB and the bloke we'll mention next, Haas. But yeah, what are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Yeah, Adam Fanua-Blake, look, 700K is a huge price tag to pay for a front rower. I believe there was some media that came out from him saying that he's going to be playing lower minutes this year at the Sharks. He looks great in preseason, looks very fit, but I think with that news alone, I'm deterred off. AFB, we've seen what he can do, and in general, he's a wrecking ball of player. He can get tries like no for fun. But I think just with him not being such a focal point in the attack, he was a focal point for us at the Warriors. You know, we would center a lot of attack around him, have shapes running off Egan at the line and running off Sean Johnson. They might do that at the Sharks, but you know they've got. He really was a center point of our attack. That and he was forced to play pretty big minutes, which I don't think he'll be getting at the Sharks. And for that reason alone, for 700K, I won't be touching him.
Yeah, look, so it obviously sounds like both of us aren't too keen on starting with him. Obviously, he's a great player. None of us are denying that. It's just at that, yeah, 700K, that premium price tag coming off a career best season. I just don't think he can replicate those sort of numbers again. But who knows? I guess we'll see how he rolls out at the Sharks. Now, moving on to one of the guys who I really don't mind this year, Payne Haas. What are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Look, he was in my initial draft. But he won't be featuring in my side this year to start the season. I can tell you that much just because of an article coming out saying that he had a bit of an off-season ankle surgery and he will be fit for round one, but that just straight away is a big red flag for me. Haas needs good minutes well, he doesn't need them, but to hit that average of 68, you'll be wanting at least 65 minutes. We've seen him go to 80 minutes. He's got a big motor. And I just think with that little tweak, he might be a bit off his game to start, or at least with Michael Maguire as a new coach, we don't know how he's going to manage the front row rotation. I still think Haas is an awesome player, probably in my opinion the best front row in the game. but just with the ankle tweak, new coach, uncertainty around minutes, if I'm paying that price tag, I want to be absolutely sure on their ability. As I touched on with who was it in the hooker section? I can't remember now, but yeah, just I did consider him, and I like him. I think he did have a down year, but yeah. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, look, you make a good point. Now, for me, if you are going to go for a premium at front row forward, he is definitely the premium to go for. We see he has a motor all day. He did have a bit of an injury plague season last year, especially at the end of the season. So there's a bit more value there compared to your AFB sort of thing. But yeah, there is a bit of uncertainty as to his minutes this year, what it looks like. And with the value that I'm supportive of going for this year at hooker and front row forward, I would much prefer start off with, say, a Terrell May, who we'll get into shortly, who is just going to be that guy at the Tigers this year and will increase in value. And he'll Haas is someone that I'd look at upgrading once one of those cash cows has kind of peaked. That's where I see Haas coming in because yeah, no doubting that he is a gun. He's an absolute beast. But yeah, it's just there's no real value there, sort of thing. You know what you're going to get. He's going to give you that 70 average, so to speak. But yeah, he doesn't possess that upside like AFB does. He's very much just meat and potatoes, just absolute machine. But yeah, doesn't really have that upside.
I do. I do think that he could be a good purchase. You know, if Maguire comes in and wants him frees up his offloading that game, then that would be massive for him. But we're yet to see it. And with the ankle surgery, I'm just a bit off him now. But yeah, I can't really fault the buy because the Broncos need him to play big minutes. That's the reality. And I can't see him playing any less than 60 minutes. So
Good
yeah.
points there. All right, we'll move on to now Mitch Barnett and Joseph Tapine. What are your thoughts on these two?
I think Barnett is intriguing with the duel. I don't think he'll be goal kicking or anything, but as a Warriors fan, I want him to be the captain. They haven't announced that captain yet. I believe it will be between him, Fisher Harris, and Roger. I believe he's a really good fit for the captaincy role. He was our best player last year. I don't mind him as a pick in SuperCoach with the duel, and I think that playing in the middle and then playing on the edge is when he really excels, when he gets a bit of both. So once again, it's just down to minutes, I guess. And, you know, you've lost Tohu Harris and you've also lost Fanua Blake. So he might step up into a role and I could see him going to an even greater level this year.
Yeah, I think there is space for him to be that guy now at the Warriors in the forward pack, kind of with JFH leading that pack. Because, yeah, as you mentioned, there is now a bit of a hole at the Wars in the forward pack. So I feel like, especially if he does get that captaincy and take it upon himself, we saw him last year have a really standout season, like got included in Origin. The man is just a machine. And as you mentioned, while he plays in the middle, he just that meat and potato sort of bloke. But then throw him on an edge, he can hit those lines, he can create those attacking opportunities. And oh yeah, I don't mind it as a buy, and especially with that duel, he's a bit of an intriguing pick for me as well.
Yeah, I find all three of those buys, Barnett, Haas, and AFB, I can't really fault anyone that goes any of them. I think they'll all produce good solid points. It's just a question of how much value is there, and is there could you spend that money better on other people? Joe Tarpany's similar. He's probably my least favorite buy of the lot so far. Yeah, look, I think he's more of a buy when you come into that Origin period and your Origin players are taking a rest. I think he generally starts quite slow, as well, and you he won't disappoint. He's a PPM beast. You'll get what you pay for or thereabouts. I don't think he's going to bleed cash, but I also don't think he's going to go leaps and bounds above. What do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I also just don't trust Ricky Stewart with his minutes. So obviously, I feel like Tarpany definitely builds into the season. So he's a bit of a notorious slow starter for those first rounds 1 to 10, and then kind of picks it up in the second halves. And the Raiders do offer do offer a bit of buy coverage, but he would be someone I'd be looking to upgrade about halfway through the season when my cows are peaking and if I'm looking to secure that position. But to start off with, he is someone that I'm just not interested in at all. I don't disagree that he's a gun. He has that attacking potential, that attacking upside. He has that offload game. But yeah, the big point for him is just the minutes, and just with Sticky, I'm just not sure I can trust him this year.
I tend to agree, mate.
So we'll move on now to I think the third most high selected player in Supercoach this year, and a fellow Tiger now, recently leaving the Roosters to now make a point to the Tigers. Terrell May, mate, what are your thoughts on him?
Straight inside. I don't think I need to say anything more. He's going to be getting what I would think is bigger minutes at the Tigers. He averaged under 50 minutes a game at the Roosters, and he was an absolute beast. We've seen what he can do. No brainer for me. I don't think I need to say much more than that.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree. I do believe will be getting bigger minutes now at the Tigers. As you mentioned, he only averaged like sub 50 minutes at the Roosters. He's come to the Tigers. He's keen to make a point. He said he wants to be a leader of that forward pack. And I really do think he's just one of those front row forwards we're going to set and forget for the whole year. We're not going to move him on. He's going to end up around 700K. He's going to take on that leadership responsibility. He's going to be the attacking sort of forward for the Tigers. And as we see, he's got that offload game and he can throw a pass. Like we saw some cutout passes last year that a front row forward just shouldn't be throwing, but he does have that in his back pocket, that attacking upside. And yeah, at 50%, I just could not disagree at all with that. Absolute lock for my team as well. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums up a great front row forward pick for this year.
Yeah, I agree, mate. We'll move on to the next three, which are Max King, Jack DeBellin, and Fisher Harris. With these three, I think they're all quite meat and potatoes. They'll tackle, they'll run. They don't give you much in the way of attack, or especially Jack DeBellin doesn't. And neither does all three of them really. They're not going to score any tries or set up many. So you're just paying for pretty much what you get. I don't see the upside in any of them at all. I would be avoiding those three at those price tags.
I tend to agree as well. There's Xavier. They don't really interest me. Like there's no value there. And if you're going for that gun sort of price for 50K more, you can lock in a Terrell May who's just going to be leaps and bounds above these guys. So yeah, out of those three, the only one I'd be somewhat interested is JFH because he is going to be one of those leaders, as we mentioned with Barnett at the Warriors now. He's going to be that guy. But I just don't see how you're really going to get more than what did he average last year? 56 points. I just don't see how maybe he could get up to 60. But yeah, look, for
Nah,
me, I'm just not really interested at all.
no, I don't think. Oh, he plays. Webby's coached him before. He plays. He's best when he's using shorter stints in 50 to 55 minute stints. If he plays 50 minutes, he's going to get you about 50 points. Simple as that, really. So I don't see him playing any bigger role than 60 minutes a game. I don't see any value in the pick.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, we'll touch on these two before we touch on the big Tino, Jackson Ford and Josh Curran. What are your thoughts on these blokes?
I think Jackson Ford is potentially priced at overs. I'm not sure. I haven't on in my predicted Warriors team. I've got him on an edge, but I, he is competing with some pretty quality players there. He's got Leka Helasima, who's coming up through the grades. I don't think he'll get the start straight away, but I think he will be pushing for that spot. We saw what he did to the Dogs last year. Almost won us the game. Had that big breakthrough try, and Jiri just got him. But yeah, Jackson Ford. I mean, I wouldn't be picking him. I don't know what his. I don't really see the upside there. He's lost Sean Johnson, which is where he got his points from. Running off good lines off him, and he could even potentially be on the bench for Nia Kure. So no hard pass for me there. And Curran, I think he's priced at what he's going to produce pretty much. The duel's handy with both of them, but I don't really see any value, and I wouldn't be spending 550K for basically meat and potatoes points. I'd want a bit of upside, a bit of flair.
Yeah, look, I would agree there as well. Jackson forward, not interested in at all. Josh Curran, slightly a bit more interested because, as we saw, he was a bit of a popular pick last year for the Supercoach players with that dual position, but he was also priced at 150K cheaper last year. Now he's at 550. You're really paying for what you're going to expect, sort of thing. He does have that upside, but yeah, just with the minutes and everything at the Dogs, I just don't see the upside really there for him. So now we're going to touch on Big Tino. So coming back off the big injury this year, what are your thoughts on Tino?
Look, I've gone back and forth on him actually. I know a lot of people in the Supercoach community are high on him with the dual, and obviously he's at a 260K odd discount as what he was priced at the season prior when he went absolutely ballistic. We all know how good of a footy player he is. He's unreal player, the leader of the Titans forward pack. I just think that with the bye round one, and also um, with him coming back from an ACL, there are a couple of red flags there, but I do think he's definite value for sure, and I do think the duel is really handy. It's just whether or not you could. I don't think he's a must-have. Let's put it that way. I would rather pick Terrell May over Tino, but I do think Tino's a great pick, and I can't fault the option. I do. I don't like the ownership, and I don't like that he's got a buy, and I don't like that he's coming back from an ACL.
Yeah, look, you've all made good points there, and especially with that ACL injury, I'm pretty sure Whisperer has put out some stats and figures that it does take a bit for them to get back in it with it. And so obviously he is at a really good price. Look, 530K for someone of his caliber is a bit of a bargain, but I just wouldn't be expecting those 70 to 80 scores sort of every week that you were expecting from Tino last year or before the injury. I think he's going to take a bit of time to warm up into it. I don't see Desi putting him big minutes straight away. I think he'll warm up and build up into the season. But I think at 530K, there is good value there. His ownership is a little bit high, but with the dual, you'll be able to flick him in between. I do think he is a good buy, but as you said, not a must-have. He definitely does have his risks about him. He's not a right home sort of must-buy sort of category where I'd put sort of Terrell May. But yeah, for Tino, I like the buy. I do believe I'll be starting with him. He does have that buy round one, which is slightly annoying, but yeah, I think just add that value with the duel. Don't be expecting, what I will say is don't be expecting, as I said, those gun scores that we'd be getting from him before with ACL injuries. We know it takes a bit of time for them to build up to where they used to be. And so, yeah, I think he'll start plodding along sort of early doors and then really build up to it. But I suppose it really does depend on how the Titans go. And I think they will be in for a bigger year after a disappointing sort of season last year.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
so we'll move on now to one of actually an interested pick here, Steffi Utokumano. What are your thoughts on him?
No, like I like the move for the Storm. I think the Storm, as you saw in the grand final last year, got absolutely beaten up in the middle by the Panthers, and it's a good pickup for the Storm. But Melbourne middle forwards generally are pretty, they've got quite a strict rotation there. No one plays monster minutes. Maybe Josh King does, but where's the upside in picking a Josh King, right? He just tackles and runs straight, doesn't offload. Stefano, look, I think he's a pretty good player, but I don't know how he's going to be used. I don't like the idea of picking a Melbourne Storm middle forward, and I don't think the upside's high enough. He does get a few tackle breaks from running over the top of people, but the offloads aren't there. And maybe running off Harry Grant could be something for him. But he's also got the bye round two, and then the Panthers in round three. So have very minimal interest in him. I'm actually surprised that he's at 12% ownership.
Yeah, look, now I agree. The Storm do have that bit of a harder start to the year, but like obviously this guy is one of the up and coming guns of the game. Like he's going to be a front row forward that's around, I think, for like the next 10 years. He's going to be an Origin. He's going to be, I think he's very similar to sort of a Haas, just not quite at that level of experience yet. But I think under Craig, he could really come into himself this year. Now, it's certainly someone that I'm personally not going to be starting with, but I do see that option there. I do quite not mind it. I do like the pick. But yeah, there is a bit of risk around him. But I think at that 530K, like he was getting decent-ish minutes at the Tigers, and we kind of saw what he can produce. He does have that attacking upside. He is one of those bigger forwards, one of those bigger bops who can find the line and can pop an offload. But it's just really how Craig kind of rotates with the minutes and then how he sort of utilizes him. So for me, he's more of a watch and wait. And yeah, like you mentioned, 12% ownership does seem a bit high, especially at front row forward, but I definitely wouldn't be talking anyone out of it. Like I do like the pick. It's just someone for me personally, I won't be starting this sort of thing.
We might touch on this next guy really quick, and then we might move down to the lower range guys. 500, 520K and below a little bit doesn't offer much, in my opinion. But we'll touch on Lindsay Smith quickly. He was in my initial draft as well. Look, after having a look at it more, I've taken him out. But I quite like. My initial thoughts were okay. He has Fisher Harris obviously leaving. He was touted to be an Australian representative. I think he will be putting his hand up for Origin and stepping into a bigger role. I really like him as a player. I think he's a great front row forward. I actually had him in my side last year as a pod buy, and he got a try against Melbourne and scored me 90 points or so. But I do think he is quite meat and potatoes. You know, he makes a shitload of tackles. That's where he gets the most of his points. And he will run a lot, but he doesn't offload any barely scores tries. Maybe there's an increased role for him. So there might be a tiny bit of value, but not for me. After thinking about it more, there's not enough value for me to be considering him.
Yeah, look, I would agree. And as you touched on there is going to be sort of that front row forward role now that JFH has left. And Lindsay, as we see, he's a bit of a PPM beast. Like he could just get out there, pump out 50 minutes and score anywhere in that 50 to 90 range. So yeah, look, decent pick, but like with Tino only 6K more, like with the dual
Yeah.
position, like I just feel like Tino is definitely a way better buy compared to a Lindsay Smith sort of guy.
I will say I do prefer Lindsay over Stefano though, which it doesn't sound like you do.
Yeah, I would agree with the people on this one. I do reckon it just really depends how Craig's going to utilize Steffi, but I think Steph is a gun. But that sounds like a bit of a case bet we could have. So we
Yeah.
might stay tuned, guys. We might have a bit of a case bet here between Steffi and Lindsay. So
Yeah.
yeah, comment, let us know what your thoughts. Who do you prefer more? So we'll move down now to some of the higher ownership guys. As you touched on, no one's really too interesting around here. We go down to here we go. Spencer Lenu and Aaron Clark. What are your thoughts on these two, Xavier?
No interest in either of them, to put it bluntly. I think Aaron Clark will start at 13. He does get good points per minute, but ultimately, I can't knock the buy. I do think there's some value there. I think he will increase in price, but for me, like it's not enough value to warrant a purchase. I like to try and stay away from the mid-range sort of forwards because they more often than not don't turn out well. And if you do see one that's coming along very well, you can always go down to them or go up to them. Starting the season with them is taking a big flyer on how many minutes they play. And Aaron Clark, you know, I'm just not sure, one, how many minutes he'll play, two, how he'll fit in at the Warriors. Because if he's on the bench, there's absolutely zero chance I would touch him. And I also just don't think his Supercoach prospects are great. I don't think he's like he tackles, he runs, but he's not going to set the world on fire. I can't see him exceeding like 500K. So, you know, he's priced at almost 400.
Yeah,
And Len,
look,
yeah,
yeah. So for me, Aaron Clark, it kind of feels a bit similar to the Joshy Curran sort of buy last year. Like he does have that duel, which is valuable. There is potentially a bit of value there if he does get that 13 role. Obviously, this is all very initial thoughts because, as you can see, kick off in 27 days. So we're getting close to it, but we're not sure on the actual teams and the actual lineups and how it all goes out. Obviously, there is a little bit of interest there from the community. Me not really too much unless you're after that sort of sub 400k bloke with the duel. I do see there is like he does sort of fill that void, but apart from that, I'm not too interested in him. And Spencer Lenu is someone who I'd be more interested in because he does kind of have that attacking upside and flair. He is a bit of a trouble boy. So as we saw last year, he missed the first 8 weeks or whatever through suspension. But with JWH leaving the Chookies, like there is a role for him to fill now. And for me, it's a bit more of a watch and wait to see where those minutes go because Terrell as well leaving, like there is massive minutes now in the Roosters forward pack. It's just where does Robbo give those and if he trusts Spencer to play those big minutes because I think if he does play like 50 to 60 minutes, I think he is really good value at sub 400k. He averaged 40 points last game off probably about averaging 40 minutes. So he's like a point a minute sort of bloke. He does, as I say, he does have that attacking sort of flair, can pop an offload, but he is just a bit of a troubled man with all the suspensions and whatnot. So it's a bit of a high risk, high reward sort of pick, I feel. But yeah, initially I would be kind of staying away sort of thing. But I do prefer him over an Aaron Clark sort of bloke.
Jeez, man, I disagree again on that one. I'd prefer Aaron over Lenu. I think Lenu's shown us who he is. And that's not a very good Supercoach option. I think when you talk about the flare comes from he runs off the back fence and he does these big barging runs and he makes post-contact meters. You don't get points for that in Supercoach. He has really short bursts of really hard runs, but unfortunately, you're not racking up many points. You get like 2 points for a run like that, and that's sort of what he does. He's not a massive tackler. He's not a huge offloader. I think, with the roles of JWH, etc., leaving, even still, he's not going to be put into some big minute role because that's not who he is as a player. So I would prefer Aaron Clark over Lenu. I just don't think Lenu is very Supercoach relevant for me, at least.
Fair enough. Now, speaking of those sort of roles freeing up now at the Roosters, we'll move on to Nahu White. Now, this is someone who I am a little bit interested in. At 367k with the duel, what are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Yeah, I much prefer him over Lenu. I think he's got a better PPM. He makes more tackles. He's more involved. Lenu's sort of very short burst of attack, and that attack is just a big carry. It's not. Whereas Nafawi White, for example, gets to a bit more work, makes a few more tackles. So I quite like the pick. He's got the duel as well. I don't mind it. I think there is some value there. It all come down to his minutes, though.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. It's going to be interesting to see how Robbo sort of fills these voids this year at the Roosters. And so I think we'll get a better understanding of like the minutes, the rotation, what position he's sort of going to play this year from the trials and whatnot. But look, initial thoughts, 368k with the duel. I like the buy. I won't lie. And yeah, 27% ownership. I can see what super coaches are thinking. Almost a quarter of super coaches owning him. So we'll move on now to one of the other. So there seems to be a few value picks in front row forward that have a bit of the dual action, which I'm loving this year. Corey Horsburgh, what are your thoughts on him, Ciola, Xavier?
I'm massive on Horsburgh. He's my favourite pick of those picks that we've mentioned. He's shown us that he can do it before. He's shown us that he can be a 550k plus player. I think as long as he's in the 17, he'll be in my side, starting or not. Most coaches want him to start and then they'll pick him. But even if he's on the bench and say Aaron Clark and Nufo White are starting, I'll still be picking Horsburgh. I think he's just a better player.
Yeah, look, that's a very good point. I agree as well. Like, I think the horse is a very good pick this year. Like, he has that value. He's at 355k. It was just last year. He was playing Origin for Queensland. He had that whole breakout season, the big red. And obviously, we've seen a lot of the preseason photos. He is trimmed down quite a bit. Like, he is looking really fit this year. I think he'll be keen to make a big point after not playing many big minutes this year. I think he's kind of formed that relationship back up again with Ricky Stewart. Again, it is a thing with one of being a forward playing under Ricky. You're just not sure on his minutes. So hopefully he has built that trust up with Ricky, and Ricky will trust him to play those sort of bigger minutes. But yeah, I think at 355k with a duel, he is someone who I definitely will be picking in my side. And I get why almost half of super coaches are picking him as well.
Yeah, they've also lost Emre Gula as well, so I think that's another big big opening for him. I think he's a great pick.
Good stuff. All right, we'll move on to another duel actually. Cohen Hess. What are your thoughts on him?
Look, I had a look. To be honest, I actually prefer Tamalolo, who we didn't touch on, as a buy. And I know a lot of people might not like that, but I just with Colin Hess coming off a big injury, I would only be interested in him if he was playing 80 on an edge, um, which I don't think he'll be doing. I think it will be Nanai and off the top of my head, it should be Nanai, and it was going to be Lukey.
But he got injured again.
Oh, sorry, it'll be Bateman. Nanai and Bateman will be the edges. So they've got Cotter, Tamalolo, and Jordan McLean in the middle. So where's Hess playing? It's likely not enough minutes. He is priced so cheap that it's not going to be a bad move if you do go for him. But I just don't really see it with him. He could have a bit of a comeback season. Um, for me, he needs to be on the edge running lines because that's what equated to points and Supercoach output for him. In the middle, I just don't think he has quite that game, and with the rotation as well, not too interested there.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. Like the Jewel is handy and is a very cheap price now. Like it's 330k. We know he's a bit of a gun, but as I said, I don't really see that upside for him. And I just much prefer your Horsburghs, your Nafu Whites. Like there's just way better upside picks than them. So I don't like the pick. I don't hate the pick, but yeah, definitely someone that's I'm not interested in personally. So we'll move down to another fellow Tiger this year, Royce Hunt. What are your thoughts on Royce?
I don't look. I can kind of understand the ownership, but I will not be picking him in my side. He absolutely reeks of Franklin Pele, Farmasili sort of vibes. When I have a look at his stats, he can play 40 minutes and still score in the 20s. Look, I know that he'll definitely be in the 17 for the Tigers, which is why the ownership's there. And he could see a 5-10 minute bump in minutes, but I think people are forgetting that, the middle for the Tigers, you've got Terrell May, you've got Clemmer, you've got Fanua Pole, you've got Alex Twal, you've got Seafarth, who I believe is on the edge, but he could be in the middle. Your 13 is Jack Bird, apparently this year. How many minutes is Royce Hunt going to get? Because he genuinely needs like 35 minutes at least to 35, 40, I would even say, to make like a money that's worthwhile. If he gets 35 minutes, he's going to be scoring like 27 points, 28 points, which is 2 points of value. And I will be avoiding him at all costs. I know that's unpopular opinion. Um, I'll be looking elsewhere for that cheapy sort of slot. I like the look of Ben Takura, for example. If Ben Takura is in the 17, I would pick him over Royce Hunt because there's more upside. He's a 6'9" prop who could get a couple tries close to the line.
Yeah, look, I think you make a good point there. Obviously, he didn't really excel at the Sharks. Played limited minutes. I think he is going to see a bit of a jump in minutes now at the Tigers. Like we brought him over for a reason. He's keen to make an impact. I reckon him and Terrell will work well through the middle. It does. Like at 250k, like there is value there, obviously. It's just how much value is actually there. Like for me, if I'm picking him, I'm after kind of if I'm picking any front row forward in this cheapy price, I'm looking for like 100k in price rises, and I do think like he will be 350, 380 sort of K, but that's definitely where he's going to max out. Like he doesn't possess nearly as much upside as a lot of the other forwards we've touched on. But I think at that 250k sort of price, if you got to fit someone in there, he would be the one I'd go for over sort of a Takore that you've touched on before. So speaking of Takore, do you want to speak a bit more about him?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's a young kid, who's about 6'9". He's a giant. The Broncos are actually running quite low in middles. If you have a look at their bench, it's a huge drop off from, the starting side. Carrigan at prop now, Haas at prop, Heffington at lock. Then on the bench, you've got like a Corey Jensen, and you'll have like Tapau, Fletcher Baker, Takura, all fighting off for 4 minutes essentially. And for me, why would I pick? For me, I just think Takura will stand for place in the side on the bench at some point this year, or even in round one. It's just between him and Fletcher Baker at the moment, and I just think he's a more exciting buy, someone that could cross over for a try every like in a string of 3 games, and make more cash, more quick cash than Royce Hunt, who I think is going to be very slow burn, and I just like to avoid those sorts of players. I think it's fine picking one, but there's safety in Royce Hunt because everyone knows that he'll be in the 17. Whereas Ben Takura, you don't know. Same as that Tom Amone bloke and the Dogs at 24%. You just don't know if these guys will be in the 17 or not. Royce Hunt, you've got the surety of he will be in the 17 every single week.
Yeah, look, I think as you've touched on there, Takure does have a bit of that potential to be an impact. Like he's a bigger body, you can't miss him. He's a tall fella. He does have that attacking upside. It'll just be interesting to see how and if Madge utilizes him. I think if there becomes any issues or any injuries at the Broncos, especially in the forward pack, I think that really accelerates him as a great buy. But for me, he'll be someone that I could be interested in like downgrading to sort of thing. But it would have to be for me, it would have to be someone that I wouldn't want to see in the 17. And then if there was an injury sort of thing, that's when it'd become interesting.
So if I'll pose this over to you then, if Royce Hunt is named on the bench and Ben Takura is named on the bench for their sides, who would you go?
Royce Hunt for sure for me.
Yeah, I'm definitely Ben Takura on that one.
There we go. But I think we sort of both on the opinions that we are higher on one or the other here. But we also have Tom and Moan at almost a quarter of Supercoaches have selected him. So what are your thoughts on him, Xavier?
Same thing as Royce Hunt. I haven't seen him play. He comes over from the Super League. I get I've been scarred by doggies for props that are this cheap before with Farmasili in the most recent years and Franklin Pele. So there's, I just do not want to go near him, even though, unless he impresses in the trials. I haven't seen too much of him, to be honest. But if he does well in the trials and looks like he could get through some work and gets named in the 17, then I might have a look. But I am biggest on Takura out of those guys just because I think he has the biggest wow factor out of them all.
Yeah, look, I think you make a good point there. We really do need to see the trials and see his minutes sort of thing because if he starts, say, for the Dogs, like I do think there's great value at him. But yeah, like as you said, we've been burnt with that kind of 17th, that prop from the Dogs that just ends up being an AE nightmare. They don't rise in price, they don't fall in price. You just end up being stuck with him. And because they're at such a low price, it costs a bit of money to upgrade him. And then if you're moving sideways, like it's just a bit of a wasted trade sort of thing. So for me, he's a bit of an avoid until we get a better understanding to see how his role actually is at the Dogs this year. And then, yeah, as I said, if he starts and he looks all right, because I know he does have a few wraps on him, then I'd be potentially a bit more interested in him. But early doors, I'm not too interested in him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, mate. That should pretty well wrap up front row forward. I know there's a couple of young guys priced at this 198 K range that could get a look in. I've heard a lot about Loco Pacifici Tonga, sorry, and same as Sam Tuibati from the Eels as well. Look, if either of them are picked, I quite like Pacifici Tonga. He was part of the SG Ball Dragon side that won the comp last year. So he looks like a good young prodigy. Once again, if he's named in the 17, I'd be having my eyes on him. Same as Sam and anyone sort of in this price range. Xavier Va'a and Ethan Roberts as well could be a shout. Anyone that's 198K in the front row forward is definitely worth consideration. I think Pacifici Tonga has the biggest wraps on him of these lot, though.
Yeah, look, I think you make a good point. We'll get way more of an understanding after a couple of the trial games to see who's included in the team, who isn't, how they look, what their sort of minutes are. But I'll just kind of mention, as I touched on before, like with these sort of sub 200K, these front row forwards, most of the time you just end up getting stuck with them and they almost turn into AE nightmares because they just don't get the minutes. They just don't raise in price. And then, as I said, if you want to upgrade or get rid of him, you're either wasting a trade sideways to move to another cheapy or sort of nuffy sort of bloke, or you got to spend 200K to upgrade. So I think for me, we'll get a better understanding, obviously, after the trials and team list and stuff. But for me, not too interested for now. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up our hooker and front row forward analysis for our first debut episode of Hooked on NRL
Yeah.
SuperCoach. Any conclusions, any final remarks, Xavier?
Just one. There was in that price range that we didn't touch on. There was just one front row forward I'd like to touch on as well that did spark my interest. It's Daniel Saifidi at 420K. I actually think same as Lindsay Collins too. So those are, if I was looking in this sort of range, these are the two guys that I would be looking at. Look, I think Daniel Saifidi had a very down year. You know, we've seen him play Origin before, and we've actually seen him priced at around 60 points per game previously. He could be due for a bounce back this year, you know, under a new coach at a new team running off Marshall King. I think he could present some value, but once again, you got to be very careful with these mid-range forwards because you're banking on them getting big minutes and having a bit of a resurgence. Look, I can see him getting resurgence. I just don't know how many minutes he'll play. The Dolphins are pretty stacked for middle forwards with Gilbert coming back. They've got Kafusi, they've got Plath. So it's a bit of a watch, but he is an intriguing pick at 1%. I think that's unders of what he should be. And then Lindsay Collins was the other one. We've touched on all these people leaving the Roosters. Warrior Hargraves, you know, they've got a big dent in their middle pack that needs repairing. People are all interested in Nafahu White and Spencer Leniu, but there's no interest for Lindsay Collins, who's the most proven. He's the best player of them. He's an Origin rep, and he's only less than 60K more than these guys, these other Roosters guys. So just something interesting to note because I think, you know, Lindsay Collins, I've got some confidence about his role and confidence that he would probably see a bit of a minutes increase. So I think at 2%, and then you look at Nafahu White at 27%, who's at 360K, like 60K cheaper. I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, I actually don't mind both those options. I think they're both more of a pod pick. Like they're definitely someone who they have a bit of potential upside to them and they're a bit more rogue compared to the others. But for me personally, it's just with the front row forwards, with the value that we seem to be having this year. And like neither of these guys have that duel. Like we have so many of these guys like Tino, like the horse, like Nafu White that have that front row, second row forward duel at better prices that we can just flick up and down. I think will be a bit more valuable. But yeah, I do like both of them as shouts. So good little picks there, Xavier.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, that's pretty much all for me, mate.
Perfect. All right. So thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know who your thoughts are in the front row, second row, the front row, and hooker position. Who are you kind of leaning towards? Who are you keen on? Who are you not? And yeah, thanks for listening,
And
guys.
also comment Lindsay Smith or Stefano, who you prefer out of those two as picks. I'm Team Lindsay and Jacob's obviously Team Stefano. That's all from us. Thank you for watching our first episode on the Locked On NRL Supercoach podcast. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Jacob, and yeah, I'm looking forward to punching a few more of these out.
Yeah, mate, sounds good. And as I said, almost under a month now till it all kicks off. So it's all going to come ripe and fast, and then we're kicking off to the season. So yeah, I'm looking forward to another 2025 NRL Supercoach season playing with you.
Easy, mate. Likewise. I'll catch you later.
Sounds good. See you, mate.
Yeah.